I started, my first paid teaching gig was in the spring of 1999. I ended up long-term subbing in Estline, South Dakota. I was then accepted into the graduate school at South Dakota State University, where I was hired as an instructor because they were short 1/3 of an instructor position, and I already had my education certification. So instead of being a TA, I got an extra class and an extra hour in the writing center. So my resume says instructor, South Dakota State University, for 3 years. When I finished up at SDSU, I was hired to teach out at Rapid City Central. I taught there for a year and taught at National American University concurrently, and then decided I wanted to come back home. And I was hired by O'Gorman High School. I moved back, taught at O'Gorman for 4 years, and then came in 2007 to teach at Roosevelt. I taught 2007, 2008, and had a bit of a crisis of conscience about teaching. It's that tenure itch a lot of teachers get, and the district offered at the time, and I'm not sure if they still do or not, a year of unpaid leave. And I took advantage of that and served as the director of communications for a big company for about a year and a half, when Diana Messick and Heidi Jorgensen reached out to me and said, hey, we're gonna start a new school and we want you to be a part of it. And I initially poo-pooed the idea and didn't think I was gonna be coming back. But you know Diana and you know Heidi, and they can be quite persuasive, and they talked me into helping start New Tech. So I was a part of New Tech High School from 2010 until 2022, is that when Jefferson opened? And where I then transitioned from New Tech High School into the PBL Academy at Jefferson. And then last spring, I was offered the opportunity to potentially move to Washington, closer to home, reuniting with Miss Jorgensen, and coming to a school that is renowned for incredible staff culture. And I thought, I'm getting towards the end of my teaching career. I'm looking for a place where I can settle in for a few more years and then ride off into the sunset. And I felt that Washington High School was going to be an exceptional fit for that. The question of why I keep doing this gives me goosebumps every time. And I always say this, and I'm very blunt about this, I don't do it for the fat stacks of cash. I do it because I've always wanted to make a difference in the world, and there were very few options available to me of ways that I could impact the world in a substantial way. I do not believe that one human can pick up a big enough stone and throw it into the metaphorical sea of humanity to make a big enough ripple to change the tide of that sea. But I can throw a lot of pebbles. And I have taught thousands and thousands of students over the course of 26 years, and each one of them is my pebbles. And they will change the tide of that sea. I believe that by pouring my love and my compassion and my energy into my students and helping them understand how amazing they can be, what sort of chances and opportunities that they have and that they can provide for themselves, that they will change that tide. I have all that faith. I had a number of teachers. Ironically enough, 2 of them were relatives of Mrs. Jorgensen. Both her mother and her uncle were 2 of the most influential teachers in my career. There is one that stands out above the rest. His name is Bill Miller. He was a science teacher at Brandon High School, and he was also my bus driver from the time I was a kindergartner until the time I could drive. And that gentleman was such a pillar of an integrity and caring. He had this amazing capacity to be firm. Here are my expectations. Don't go against them. And hey, I want to check in on you. How are you doing today? I am proud to say that I hope that I've channeled a little bit of Bill Miller, especially later on in my career as I've matured as a teacher. I have been incredibly fortunate to run into hundreds of former students who either noticed me through my continued education or through my side venture as a business owner. But last summer, my business partner and I were sitting on the patio and just having a 5-minute break that we hadn't had together in a long time. And a former student walked up and he said, I bet you don't remember my name. And somehow, some way, the brain was right there. And I said, hi, Jacob. And he literally stopped. He goes, I was not the best student in the world. And I said, you had a different personality. He goes, I'm still kind of a different personality, but I wanted to stop and say when I saw you sitting here that you helped me make it. I wouldn't have done it without you. And I got all choked up in the moment, and he goes, I wondered if I could get a hug. And his girlfriend is standing there, and I'm, you know what, yeah, I'll give you a hug. And I stood up and I gave him a hug. And he said, thank you very much for everything you did. And he walked away, and I sat back down, and I've got tears in my eyes. And I turn and look, and Steve's got tears in his eyes. He's like, I knew you did really cool stuff. He said, I've never seen that before. That is one of my favorite stories. I am fortunate to have hundreds of those. It is that long-term delayed gratification. Teaching is the ultimate delayed gratification profession, in that you might have a couple of aha moments, and you might develop a couple of really great relationships with kids in the moment, but the real payoff is when you meet them 10 and 15 years down the road with their kids, in their professional setting. I just had a former student message me yesterday, hey, I did it, graduated with my Juris Doctorate. Again, absolute goosebumps, chills up and down. I don't know that I did anything special, but that former student remembered me enough that he took the time to send me a message. And it just blows my mind, blows my mind. Talk about imposter syndrome. I am completely unworthy. I firmly believe that in the realm of life, sometimes the negatives will weigh us down. And I have cultivated, there's a piece of advice that I got from a teacher in Rapid City, a stack of celebrations. That when I have a bad day, I have this stack. It's just a folder, some of it's letters, some of it's just super short handwritten notes, thank you things that either come from students or like this is from a former administrator of mine. These are super important to me because teaching is hard. It is one of the hardest things I've ever experienced in my life, but it is also one of the most rewarding. It is incredible to me that I get to do this job on a day in and day out basis, and that kids take the time, unsolicited, to thank me. And all I really want to do is help them be the best human they can be. Sometimes it's gifts, sometimes it's stuff kids don't realize the value of. One of my favorite stories to tell is we were working on a project for project-based learning, and we had a group that was having some dynamic difficulties, and one of their group members was incredibly artistic. And she, as they were working through their dynamics, she just kept sketching and sketching and sketching. And she sketched this gorgeous pencil and pen sketch of a 1920s flapper. And when her group saw it, they were blown away. And they said, can we use this as part of the project? And she would never consider herself a leader, but she galvanized her group around that. And they created one of the most incredible covers for a student magazine I've ever seen. In fact, I've taken it with me when I've spoken at conferences to show it off. She folded it in half and threw it away. And I saw it, and she walked out of the classroom, and I walked over and I pulled it out of the trash, and like, there's no way I'm gonna. And I took it home and I framed it. I brought it back the next day and I hung it. And she was astounded. And I looked at her and I said, you know, you don't always think about how good you do things, how well you do things. And that's a variety of students. I said, but this is really good. And if you're okay with it, I'd love to keep this artifact. And she said, yeah, that would be great. I said, will you sign it for me? She shook her head and she said, why would I do that? I said, because it's art and it's your art. And that was very early on in PBL. And she helped start a tradition in my PBL classroom where we had an entire wall of student-generated art. And it always started with hers. And years later, she stopped in and she just said, I never understood. She said, but I'm very grateful that you kept that. And I said, so am I. It's a beautiful piece. And I have been fortunate to have students gift me so many things. I have a wall in my basement at home of student-generated artwork. I've got a whole box that when I moved from Jefferson to Washington, I don't know what to do with, but I get my own classroom next year. So now I've got a pretty good idea. This one is kind of a special one. I don't know if you know the story behind that one. George Hawkins, South Dakota Teacher of the Year. An amazing teaching partner. This is part of what helps make teaching so important. You forget that you're not only impacting the kids you're working with, but the staff that you're working with. I have invitations of students I've never even taught before. Thank you letters that are super simple, but filled to the brim. It's so much fun to be able to look at like students who stop at the Guthrie and then bring me a bookmark, right? I will probably never use that bookmark because it's gonna live in this particular place. And this one, I believe, yep, another, just a handmade little card from my friend Lyric. And she was one of my most outspoken students. It's so much fun. I mean, and I've got like stuff from communities that we worked with. We worked with Midwest Honor Flight, and the kids did some really great volunteering. Some really great cards from like way old former students. It's just really cool, the variety of things that I get a chance to be a part of, because I've gotten to be a teacher for so long, right? Like that's super cool. And it's a mom who writes me a small letter, who acknowledges that I'm one of the most challenging teachers, but how much she recognized that her son had grown. And that is, those kind of things really have made moving or teaching for 26 years worth it.